Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my November wrap-up and my December TBR starring Jack. He just happened to be here when I started this video. So anyway, let's talk about November. November was a bit of a rough month for me. First of all, I had a work trip in the beginning of the month, and then right around the holiday here in the US, I got super sick. Obviously, that put a big damper on my reading. However, I still managed to finish all of the books I wanted to read in November, except for one. I will tell you which one that is in a moment, but first I'm going to get into ranking these books like I normally do from my least favorite to my favorite. It was really hard to rank the books this month. I feel like I didn't dislike any of the books. I enjoyed most of the books. I had issues with most of the books. I don't know if I want to say issues, but let's just say there was like pros and cons to every single book I read this month, which makes ranking them really difficult. So I just had to go with my gut feeling. So to kick us off, my sixth favorite book of November is Funeral Girl by Emma K. Oland. This book was sent to me by one of my followers over on Instagram, Kristen's Reading Nook. I will put her channel handle down below in case you want to go over to Instagram and check her out. She's such a kind person. But she read this book. It sounded like it'd be something up my alley because it's about a young girl who works in a funeral home who can talk to ghosts. So she can talk to ghosts of the recently deceased. So like YA fantasy / supernatural with a bit of horror. Like, yes, please. Yes, please. However, this book did not turn out like I thought it would. So I want to read you what's on the back of this book so I can kind of explain where my head is at. So, like I said, this girl works at a funeral home. So, when her classmate, Milo, meets an untimely end and his body ends up at her funeral home, Georgia can't resist bringing his spirit back. But fulfilling Milo's final request turns out to be no simple task. To help him, Georgia will have to come closer to ever to her fears and her grief. Now, when I read that, I thought that maybe the plot of this book was going to be Georgia helping to find out who killed her classmate. But that is not what this book is about at all. Not at all. This book is a deep exploration of not grief, but like death, about what death really means. It's an exploration on death and having anxiety about death. That is what this book is about, which was not what I expected. So again, it's not the book's fault, but it threw me off a little bit. It definitely threw me off, made me think, what the heck is going on? So that's why this book is at the bottom. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. I will talk more about it eventually whenever I do a review. My fifth favorite book that I read in November is going to be Lurking in the Dark, a HorrorTube anthology. I am so happy because I won a copy of this book from David over at David's Book Reviews. I will link his channel down below. I love this book because it's actually written by people that I know on BookTube. As much as, we can know each other through videos, but I feel like I've gotten to know a lot of these creators just from following them and from interacting with them, which makes reading this book like a really fun experience. However, I will say it is a short story collection. It's a short story collection of a bunch of different horror stories. And like most short story collections, or at least I feel this way, like there are some that are really, really good, and there are some that I just couldn't personally connect with. So I feel like the stories written by people that I know, quote unquote, so Pax Panic, Jeremy Fee, E.D. Lewis, anyone that I feel like I know a little bit, those are all the stories that I liked, that I could connect with, that I enjoyed, because I feel like I know where the author is coming from. However, the stories written by people that I don't know, that I've never heard of, that I don't know as well, I feel like I don't really know where they're coming from, so I didn't enjoy those ones as much. So not necessarily the book's fault, it's just my personal opinion, just how I felt it was easier to connect with the stories for people that I know. So even though this is number 5 on the list, because it has some hits and misses, still a really enjoyable experience, and I still recommend it to support all of our HorrorTube and BookTuber friends. My 4th favorite book of November is Physique by Angie Sage. This is the 3rd book in the Septimus Heap series, and I'm happy to say that this 3rd book was way better than book 2. Way better than book 2. I still had a couple issues with it. I still think it's not quite as fun as the first one. I'm starting to feel like none of the books in this series are going to be as fun as book number 1, but this one was definitely an improvement. There's some new things introduced in this book, so I feel like it takes a completely different turn from the previous books, where there's brand new characters, brand new world building, brand new plot, which I think really helps make this one a step above the previous book. So still have some issues with it. Still don't think it's as good as the first one. Yes, I just said that. I'm repeating myself. I don't know what else I can say about this one other than it was my 4th pick for the month, so let me move on. My 3rd favorite book for November is going to be Blue Revolution by S.E. Martins. Now, S.E. Martins was kind enough to reach out to me directly and send me a copy of this book. I believe she actually found me through Pax Panic. So Pax, thank you so much for sending this author and this book my way, because I feel like this book was written just for me. I feel like this book was written just for me. So it's going to be really hard to review this book critically, because I really love it so much. I really love it so much, because this book makes me feel very nostalgic. I'm a child of the 80s/90s, grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, and I feel like this book could have been written in the early 90s, and I feel like a lot of the world building, characters, and plot that are in here remind me of things that I loved in my childhood. So Final Fantasy VII, if you've ever played a Final Fantasy or a role-playing game, this book reminds me of that. If you've ever watched Sailor Moon or other animes about like magical girls with powers, this is what that book reminds me of. Like, there are so many things from my childhood that this book just like nails in on. Again, it's going to be hard to review it because I feel like it was written for me personally. If any of those things I mentioned sound like things that you loved in your childhood, oh man, you are going to like this one. You are going to like this one. More to come on it later, but let me move on to the top 2. And again, these top 3 here, they were all very hard to kind of pick and choose, and I just had to go with my gut. So, my second favorite book of November was Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. If you've been following my channel for a while, you will know I've been having some issues with some of the books that I've gotten in my Owl Crate book box, because it's a lot of YA fantasy, and a lot of YA fantasy tends to follow the same tropes. However, this one was surprisingly different. This book was surprisingly different. It's about a girl who is a monster, and she's basically like trying to defeat this other guy who's known as the hero. It's the hero's job to kill the monster. And on the surface, like, that sounds like a simple concept, but the way that the book approaches this, I think, is really cool. It's really cool. This book went in completely unexpected directions, completely unexpected characters, and oh my god, that ending also completely unexpected. This book was a surprising delight, I kind of went in with like this will just be a generic YA book. I was pleasantly surprised. Can't wait to talk more about this one. So, Only a Monster, a very pleasant surprise. That brings me to my number one favorite book of November, which was also a pleasant surprise, and not even a pleasant surprise, like a complete surprise, and that is going to be Code Red by Regina St. Clair. Now, do not let this cover fool you. I actually think that this cover does a disservice to this book, a disservice, because anyone looking at this cover would think like it is this like hardcore like horror book, blah 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 blah. Maybe it's violent and gory and yes, it is some of those things, but also this book is hilarious. This book has like heartwarming stuff in it. It's got romance in it. Yes, I swear to God, it's got humor, it's got heart, it's got romance. I mean, this book is basically like every other book that I love. It's got a little bit of everything. It has a little bit of everything. Yes, it has a little bit of horror, a little bit of vampires, but it has so much humor, so much heart. I could not have been more pleasantly surprised about this book. Pleasantly surprised. I really wish it had a different cover because I feel like more people would read it. No offense to whoever designed the cover. It is very creepy, and I get that it's supposed to be a creepy book. But again, all the things that I loved about it were not the creepy parts. They were some of the other stuff. So this book was such a surprise and such a pleasant surprise that I had to put it as my number one. So that brings me to the one book that I did not finish in November, and as of filming this video, I still have not finished it yet, and that is going to be Nightmares and Dreamscapes by Stephen King. I knew going in that this was going to be a chunky book, and because of my travel, because of being sick, it was just the one book that I could not get to. So this will be going into my December TBR pile along with the rest of the books that I'm about to mention now. Normally, I start out the month with a recommendation from readers such as you, but for December, I am taking a little bit of a break. I'm trying to make my TBR pile manageable because I know holidays are coming up, things are going to be busy. I just might run out of time. So there's no reader recommendation this month. My Stephen King book for the month I already mentioned. I'm going to continue Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Should I finish that before the end of the month, I might start another one, but I'm not going to tell you what that is yet. So let's move on to my adult fantasy of December, which is actually going to be a buddy read this month. Some of you may remember that I buddy read The Shadow of the Gods with David's book reviews a few months ago. We decided that we are going to continue the series. So the next book is The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. David and I are buddy reading this book again this month. We've already started it, already exchanged a couple emails. I have heard from some people that this was not as good as the first one, but you know, sequels are hard, so I'm still holding out hope that it is an enjoyable reading experience. Next up, I have my rando book of the month, which is usually either a historical fiction or sometimes a romance, but way earlier this year, I read Crave, which is like a YA supernatural romance, so I decided it would be a good time to read the sequel, which is Crush. Crush is the sequel of Crave. It's basically like an updated version of Twilight. I loved the first book, even though I am fully aware that it is super corny and over the top. I don't care. I loved it. So I'm hoping that this sequel is also corny, over the top, and delightful at the same time. Next up, I have my YA fantasy for December, and my pick for this month is going to be A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. I read An Ember in the Ashes way back in, I want to say it was 2020. So I had to remind myself what happened in the first book. I had mixed feelings about the first book, which is why it's taken me so long to get to the sequel. But I picked this book up at a book sale, so it was super cheap. I've been wanting to get around to it, and I figured, hey, you know what? Why not end out the year and continue with the series, see if the sequel is any better than the first one. So A Torch Against the Night is my YA pick for December. Next up, I have my middle grade fantasy for the month, and I decided to take a break from the Septimus Heap series because first book was really good. The second one I really kind of didn't like. The third one was just okay. So I am going to finish the series, but I want to take a break because I keep saying that I am going to read this series, and I finally decided it was time, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. At least that's how I pronounce it, Stiefvater. I read The Raven Boys, this book, many years ago. Many years ago. I really don't remember anything about it, but I finally collected the rest of the series. I never made it past book 1 in the past. I plan on reading the whole series this time. So I'm rereading book 1, because like I said, I don't remember what happened in it. And I'm really looking forward to it because I know this is a wildly popular series. I love Maggie Stiefvater. I've read a lot of her other books. I love them all. So I am excited to revisit this one, finally reread it, finally remember what happens in it, and then hopefully finally continue with the rest of the series. And finally, that brings me to my book box book of the month. And for this month, I decided to pick The Drowned Woods. First of all, December, that kind of helped me pick this one. And also, if you haven't noticed, a lot of the books that I picked out this month have like these kind of whitish covers. So I also tried to find a book box book with a whitish cover. Hopefully when I go to take pictures over on Instagram, all of these white covers will look really pretty. I don't know. We'll see. It was just something I decided I was going to do this month for no reason other than it's the holidays, white, snow, Christmas. That's the feeling I got. So hopefully this book turns out to be like Only a Monster and not like a forgery of roses, which I really didn't like. So hopefully this is one of the better ones. I always keep an open mind and hope for the best. That is all for my November wrap up and my December TBR. I want to know from you, what was your favorite read of November? What are you planning on reading in December? Was it anything I mentioned? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Helps out that YouTube algorithm, the gods up there. And if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and maybe more furry friends coming soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.